The second longest reigning British monarch, Queen Victoria, was born on the 24th of May 1819 after a desperate race between George III's sons to produce an heir to the British throne. The sudden and early death of the future King George IV's only daughter, Princess Charlotte, had not only stunned the British public, but also triggered one of the most major succession crises in the country's history. 3 royal weddings took place in 1818, and it was George III's 5th child, Edward, the Duke of Kent, and his wife, Princess Victoria, who claimed the throne for their newborn daughter. Their daughter, Victoria, would ascend the throne in 1837 and reign for over 60 years. While plenty is known about the Queen herself, far less is known about her half-siblings from her mother's first marriage, both of whom were critical to her formative years. Here are the little-known lives of Queen Victoria's siblings, and this is Crown Undone. Queen Victoria's mother, Princess Victoria, was born in Coburg on the 17th of August 1786, becoming the 4th child to Francis, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, and Countess Augusta of Reuss-Ebersdorf. In 1803, at just 17, Victoria married Emmerich Karl, the second Prince of Leiningen, who was 23 years her senior. Victoria and Emmerich Karl had 2 children together. Prince Karl was born on the 12th of September 1804, and Princess Feodora was born on the 7th of December 1807, but just 7 years after the birth of their daughter, Emmerich Karl died of pneumonia in 1814 at 50 years old. While the then 10-year-old Karl succeeded his father as the 3rd Prince of Leiningen, his widowed mother served as regent of the principality during Karl's minority. But just 2 years into her widowhood, Victoria's family was already becoming intimately entangled with the royal family over in the British Isles. Her younger brother Leopold had married the future George IV's only legitimate daughter and heiress to the British throne, Princess Charlotte, in 1816. Leopold had received a Russian military title at just 6 after his and Victoria's sister, Princess Juliane, married into the Russian imperial family. He would eventually fight against France during the Napoleonic Wars when French troops overran the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg. Once Napoleon was defeated, Leopold moved to England and married Charlotte, which would have most likely guaranteed him a spot as Britain's prince consort, but their marriage would only last a year. After Charlotte's death during childbirth, a devastated Leopold wrote to his sister, quote, "Deep down, I was made for a life of family intimacy. I wanted to be quiet and happy with my mouse, and nothing more." After Charlotte's death, Leopold continued to live in England, courting a woman that looked strikingly like the dead princess, until he was elected as king of the newly independent Belgium in 1831, having turned down the Greek throne a year earlier. Still, it was the death of Leopold's first wife, the only legitimate grandchild of the then King George III, that set off the Georgian royal baby race. With an abundance of financial incentives now offered by the British Parliament, who were desperate to keep the monarchy intact, 3 of King George's sons were now bolting to the altar. In the year 1818, George III's 3rd son, the future William IV, married Adelaide of Saxe-Meiningen, his 4th son Edward married Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, and the king's 7th son, Prince Adolphus, the Duke of Cambridge, married Princess Augusta of Hesse-Kassel. As the 5th child of King George III and Queen Charlotte, it could never have been anticipated that Prince Edward would father one of Britain's most renowned monarchs. Born on the 2nd of November 1767, Edward spent the majority of his adult life in the army, becoming a Knight of the Order of the Garter in 1786, and in 1791 he was transferred to Canada, where he became the first member of the royal family to live for an extended period of time in North America, and then the first prince to visit the US since American independence. Edward was allowed to return to England in 1798 after falling from his horse, and 3 years later he was appointed governor of Gibraltar. The Duke of Kent's active military career abruptly ended when he was just 35, after his harsh attempts to restore discipline among his troops in Gibraltar caused the soldiers to mutiny. He was recalled by his brother Frederick, the Duke of York, and though retained the nominal governorship of Gibraltar until his death, he was never allowed to return. Now 50, the Duke of Kent had already been considering marriage when his niece Charlotte, the heiress presumptive, died at just 21, and the sister-in-law of his deceased niece, Princess Victoria, seemed like the best option. Edward and Victoria were married on the 29th of May 1818 at Ehrenberg Palace in Coburg, and 2 months later a joint ceremony was organised in Kew Palace to celebrate the marriages of both Edward and his older brother William when the former arrived back in England. The now Duke and Duchess of Kent moved to Leiningen soon after their marriage. But once Victoria became pregnant, the couple raced back to England, determined to have their first child born in the country that they could possibly one day rule. While Prince Carl completed his private education in Bern, Princess Feodora joined her mother and new stepfather to move from Bavaria to London, where her half-sister was born on the 24th of May 1819 at Kensington Palace. Although Adelaide, the wife of George III's third son, the future William IV, had given birth to a daughter on the 27th of March 1819, she had died that same day. Named Alexandrina Victoria after one of her godparents, Tsar Alexander I of Russia, and her mother Victoria, the newborn princess became fifth in the British line of succession. Still hoping to save on expenses and manage Edward's massive debt, the Kents moved to Woolbrook Cottage in Devon, but their incognito seaside life wouldn't last long. Despite developing a cold on one of the wintry nights at the cottage, Edward insisted on taking a walk along the nearby beach, but within days his cold had become frighteningly worse, and the bloodletting and cupping treatment performed by the London physician sent down to help the Duke only worsened Edward's condition. Feverish and delirious, Prince Edward died from pneumonia on the 23rd of January 1820, just 6 days before his long-reigning father, George III, died as well. With the deaths of both her father and grandfather, the 8-month-old Victoria became third in line to the British throne, with just her uncles Frederick, the Duke of York, and William, the Duke of Clarence, ahead of her. Victoria grew up close with her older half-sister Feodora over the 9 years that they both lived in Kensington Palace. Both girls were devoted to one another, and Feodora was one of the few other children that Victoria was allowed to interact with on a regular basis. Feodora, Victoria, and their mother used to take walks around Kensington Gardens, each holding the other's hand. But just as her younger sister would also recall, Feodora resented the isolation at Kensington, even writing to Victoria decades later, quote, "When I look back upon those years, which ought to have been the happiest in my life, I cannot help pitying myself. Not to have enjoyed the pleasure of youth is nothing, and not one cheerful thought in that dismal existence of ours was very hard. I escaped some years of imprisonment, which you, my poor darling sister, had to endure after I was married." Feodora also noted that at Kensington Palace, her quote, "only happy time was driving out with Victoria when she could speak and look as she liked." Early in 1828, just before Victoria's 9th birthday, Feodora married Ernst. The two were brought together with the assistance of Ernst's cousin, the future Queen Adelaide, and although the two had only met twice before their engagement, and Ernst had a very small income, Feodora was eager to get out of Kensington Palace. The couple returned to live in Germany and had 6 children together, and like Victoria, Feodora explicitly valued her marriage over her children, writing to her half-sister in 1841, quote, "I do most fully participate in your opinion that, with all the love for one's children, it is not to be compared with that for a husband." Feodora returned to Britain as a member of the royal party during Victoria's coronation in 1838, and would regularly visit her half-sister for the rest of her life. The two would relate over their grief at losing their husbands at around the same time. Ernst died in 1860 and Victoria's husband Albert died the year afterwards, and Victoria even hoped that her and Feodora could live together as widows in Britain. In 1872, Feodora's youngest daughter died of scarlet fever at just 32, and the devastated Feodora wrote that, quote, "I wish that my lord would be pleased to let me soon depart." And just a few months later, she did. On the 23rd of September 1872, Feodora died, probably from cancer. Upon hearing the news, Victoria wrote in her journal, quote, "My own darling, only sister, my dear excellent noble Feodora is no more. I stand so alone now. No near and dear one near my own age. She was my last near relative on an equality with me, the last link with my childhood and youth." Victoria shared a less intimate relationship with her half-brother Karl, who studied law at the University of Göttingen from 1821, and in 1829 he married Marie, the Countess of Klebelsberg, and the pair had 2 children together. He became a Knight of the Garter in 1837, and in 1848 he was appointed the head of foreign affairs in the German Empire, after briefly serving as Prime Minister of the Provisional Central Power, the interim government established to address the political vacuum left by the 1848 German Revolution. In 1853, Karl withdrew from public life, and 3 years later, on the 13th of November 1856, at just 52, he died from a stroke. Queen Victoria wrote in her journal, quote, "I cannot realise that my dearly loved only brother has been taken from us. Whilst I write this, I feel as if it could only be a bad dream, from which I might yet awake, to see his dear face, hear his joyous voice and laugh, and enjoy his delightful company." Britain's Queen Victoria outlived both of her siblings by decades, dying on the 22nd of January 1901 at 81 years old. Those were the lives of Queen Victoria's little-known half-siblings, and this was Crown Undone.